Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm founder and CEO Jim West, and today we have a phenomenal guest that is molding programs and security initiatives on larger scales for small nations, but doing big things. And so we're going to get into that a little bit. But without further ado, I'd like to turn over for him to introduce and tell us a little bit more about himself. I have Mr. Jay Anson right here on our podcast. So, Jay, welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm really excited to be here. I've seen a lot of your previous podcasts and the topics that are covered, and looking forward to the conversation. I'm a cybersecurity professional. I've been doing it for probably about 10 years, dedicated to cybersecurity. I'm a retired U.S. Army signal officer, retired out of U.S. Southern Command in Miami, Florida, and then stayed in Florida, and I currently work and split my time between Florida and the Republic of Palau, where I do most of my fintech initiatives as well. So, looking forward to the conversation. Thank
Well,
you.
just in a short amount of time, he's already dropped a lot of different experiences that he's had. I mean, he mentioned Southcom. So, for a lot of folks that aren't familiar with some of the military jargon, around the globe, there's different combatant commands. And Southcom is focused on South America, Central to South America, I believe I can say. Pretty much anything south of
Yeah.
Florida, they cover. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on. A lot of stuff that, Jay is obviously not going to be able to talk about due to classification levels. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in these different regions of the world from a Department of Defense perspective. So the Southcom is just the Southern Command, if you will, or combatant command. And so, but yeah, these regions like you have UCOM, you'll have AFRICOM, you'll have the PACOM in the Pacific. So all these regions and they have very important missions and initiatives. But that's just one facet of many facets that Mr. Anson brings to this podcast today. So one of the things I kind of want to talk to Jay about is kind of like the day in the life of a CISO, because we hear this term a lot. We see a lot of these CISOs in data breach reports and other reports that they're being quoted. They're the ones that are leading these articles and these research papers. And a lot of folks, they see the title, but they don't really have that under the hood look of what really a CISO is and does. And so I have Jay here to kind of maybe share a day in the life of his perspective of life as a CISO, since that's one of the many hats that he wears. So, Jay, could you maybe paint the picture for us of a day in the life of a CISO?
So day in the life. Wow. I mean, it varies day by day, of course, just like with any other job when you're dealing with technology. The technology is always changing. So you just try to set your priorities and go. Uh, and a lot of the work that I do, I'm the CISO for the Ministry of Finance in the Republic of Palau. And so my focus is on, of course, protecting the Ministry of Finance's information systems, anything with payroll processing, processing vendor payments for the government. What else do they do? Budgeting, taxation. They also, because a lot of revenue comes from customs and immigration operations with the collection of fees and taxes from imports and exports. Immigrations and customs falls under the Ministry of Finance. So
Oh.
we do a lot of things with those systems to protect them and make sure that they're, the CIA triad: confidential,
Mhm.
integrity, confidentiality, integrity, availability of the data, so that the operators can operate every day. Palau is unique in the sense that they are not as technologically advanced in terms of cybersecurity as you would think. We've been in the news a lot lately because of the different cyber attacks, a couple of ransomware attacks that happened just this year. But there are other things going on in the network for a variety of threat actors against those different systems. So I really I get my priorities from Palau's president, the Minister of Finance, of course, and then some, it's stakeholder management, it's communications management, depending on what's going on. And then, just recognizing the capabilities and the technology available and then setting my priorities and how I want to, so it's, and I get a lot of my there's the Ministry of Finance has a CIO slash CTO, so I get a lot of my cues from him, and I report to him on the status of the networks and where I see vulnerabilities and gaps that need to be closed and how we should prioritize those gaps. Because at the end of the day, a CISO or any cybersecurity engineer, analyst, professional, our job is to make sure that he's able to do his job, and his job is to make sure that everyone can leverage automation and network technology to just make life better and their work easier.
Mm. Well, let me kind of back up and unpack. There's a lot. Again, Jay has given us a whole bunch of layered information here, and let me try to kind of cut through some of these layers for those watching. He mentioned, just because it's one ministry of finance, there's a lot of departments and divisions and sections within that ministry. So when he started talking about the customs part, that can be a full-time job by itself. So my hat's off to you, Jay, for being able to wear what I would consider a big hat with a bunch of smaller hats underneath it, because the needs of this section of department vary from the threats and needs of this one and then this one and this one. So when you mention fintech and dealing with the finances and digital delivery of whether it's benefits to the citizens or payments to government employees, all these systems are usually ran on various different platforms that they all have their own security concerns and issues. So having to monitor all these various platforms, having to kind of what I call spinning the plates of your security program across various sections and divisions, man, that's a very time consuming, it can almost drive you insane type of job. So kudos for you to take on such a challenge like that. But what people need to understand, when Jay earlier mentioned that CIA triad, the confidentiality, integrity, availability, sometimes for different mission purposes and objectives, they're slightly different focuses in those. And so a lot of folks are familiar with a little bit like risk management framework, the NIST RMF controls. And even when you're trying to apply it, even though it works for federal and government, when you start getting into more commercial entities, it takes on a different aspect where sometimes a business might not need as much confidentiality as the US government does or Department of Defense, but they need higher integrity or maybe even more availability. So when you're dealing with a small nation that's got a lot of strategic infrastructure building, construction projects, and they have a lot of stuff coming in, there's opportunity for people to, one, we hear a lot about supply chain risk attacks. And so when you are depending on shipments of things to help further projects, those concerns as well. So adding that to Jay's plate, I'm sure is something that's just going to keep adding more and more responsibility. But a guy like Jay is able to spin these plates and work across all these different departments and sections to ensure that the security needs are met. So just that part of being a CISO, particularly for Jay to be a CISO, that's a very complex task. So like I said, keep spinning all the various plates and keep everything operating, because that's the end of the day, the goal here. But Jay, working for the small nation of Palau, I want to kind of give people a little bit of quick history and facts of what I know, and then you can share a little bit and correct me where I'm wrong. But for folks that are just hearing about this small nation called Palau for the first time, look it up on YouTube. There's a lot of videos that show the great, the nature of it and how this nation is very adamant on protecting the ecosystems and nature. And that's one of the real things that I really like about this nation, is that's like a top priority for the government. Two, they have about 18,000 people on the island, so it's not a huge population. So to put that in perspective, when people hear of like Yuma, Arizona in the United States, Yuma, Arizona has 100,000 people. So already Palau, 20%, they make up 20% of Yuma, Arizona's population. So that we kind of put perspective, we got 18,000 people. So with an island nation of 18,000 people, one of the smallest nations on earth, you're starting to hear about it in the news, and there's a lot of reasons why, which Jay and I do not have near enough time in this podcast to talk about the geopolitical issues at stake. But what we could talk about, though, is the fact that this is a country that's aware of emerging technology, and they're trying to leverage technology to the benefit of their people and their nation. And this is an amazing, and will be, years to come, a great case study to see how a country can start essentially at level one of security, and with someone like Mr. Anson leading in that way to strategize their plan to build national security programs, educational training programs for their young youth to grow up and work in the government, and so on and so forth. So there's so much opportunity here. And with someone like Mr. Anson, he's helping to kind of steer and guide that. And that's a huge responsibility for anyone. So, with all that being said, Jay, could you maybe also offer maybe a few facts about Palau that people watching and hearing about it for the first time can get to know more about this country?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, you mentioned the conservation efforts and priorities. So Palau, a couple things on that. So Palau is one of the 7 underwater wonders of the world due to its diverse ecosystem and just the like different, I think 1,400 different species of fish, hundreds of different species of coral, and so it's protected and preserved. We like to think of ourselves as a pristine paradise just because of that. A lot of the stuff you see when you go, it's huge with scuba divers, snorkelers, just because of the under sea life. I mean, when you go diving in Palau, it's not like a lot of other places. You're almost guaranteed to see sharks, turtles, and
Nice.
large sea animals. So it's manta rays are a huge attraction there. Um, so Palau also has a UNESCO site, protected site called the Southern Lagoon. So it's a group of islands. It's protected by and patrolled by rangers, by radar, satellite imagery to make sure no one's going in there and upsetting that area. Palau is also the first shark sanctuary in the world. I think in 2015 that came into effect, or maybe it was 2005. And also 80% of Palau's economic exclusionary zone is a marine sanctuary. So the
Nice.
Palau National Marine Sanctuary, they again is no take, no fishing. The other 20% is open for commercial fishing, and then it's just it's a managed program. So they're relooking and working with experts to figure out, other ways to manage it, other ways to portion which areas are no take and which areas are protected and open for tourism and commercial activities. The 300-mile economic exclusionary zone, um, it kind of redefines how Palauans look at Palau, and Oceania looks at the islands, right? So a lot of people say small country, small island. We look at ourselves differently. So the economic exclusion zone stretches from the land 300 miles out and then around Palau. So you're actually dealing with an area the size of France,
Wow.
Germany, and Palauans are very in tune with the ocean and the ocean life. I mean, it's we always say it's like living in the Moana movie, right? Like
Yeah.
everything is if you have a boat, like just about everybody has a boat. Everything's boating activities on the weekends, lots of
Mhm.
fishing, and just enjoying the ocean. So, a lot of tourists pay a lot of money to go and enjoy Palau, but Palauans get to enjoy it every day, every weekend, depending on what you do.
That's
Um,
nice.
yeah. So you mentioned also, the dependence on technology. Palau has historically uh, not really kept up with technological advancements in stride. It's always this leap. They made the leap to satellite communications. I think it was in 1996. Uh, Before that, there really wasn't a lot in terms of phone service. There was one TV channel. It was pretty rudimentary, right?
Was the
And
one
then
TV channel like Palau One or P1 was the channel?
no, it was called Walu TV, and it
Oh,
was they would get tapes of shows from the U.S., mostly either Washington State, Oregon, and Vancouver. So anything on the West Coast, and then they would be
okay.
shipped there, and then they'd broadcast it on this one channel. So I always tell everyone when I was growing up, um, and it's not 24 hours. It wasn't 24 hours. It was only from like 3 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Wow.
So, as a kid growing up, we would turn on the TV around 2:45 and it would be all staticky, and then it would clear and someone would slide a handwritten schedule
Yes.
of what shows were going to be shown. And then we'd decide, are we going to stay in and watch TV or go out and play?
Okay.
Most of the time we'd go out and play, right? Yeah, so I mean that, but
It'd be
then
too hard to bring that back these days, right? With the
the
internet now and
yeah, no,
fireworks out the box.
it's so I mean they made these leaps forward. They got a fiber optic cable installed in 2015, and kind of they were gifted a Huawei uh, mobile core network so that they could have cell phone service on the island. And so, and then now we're at a point where we need to modernize again with 5G coming in. We're trying to get we're running a second fiber optic cable from Singapore to Palau. Uh, and so that's going to open up a lot of capability. They're doing fiber to the home. There's a couple of projects there. I mentioned the 5G Open RAN mobile core network that's being installed. So what that means, not only is quality of service going to be better, but the cyberspace attack surface is also going to open up exponentially,
Yeah.
right? And the average Palauan is going to be exposed to more threats, cyber threats than before. Right now, uh, there's no like SMS smishing that isn't a thing in Palau. They don't get the
Yeah.
smishing stuff. There's no vishing because like banks there don't have that service where you can authenticate with voice. It's very much a paper uh, currency economy where you got to go to the bank in person and get cash. A lot of stuff is still paid for in cash. We're trying to fix that with some of the fintech initiatives that we have. So as you uh, introduce those cyber risks, you also have to introduce things like training and equipping people to recognize threats and avoid them. And then also put technology in place to mitigate those risks as much as possible at your cybersecurity perimeters before they even get to the
To the people.
users. So,
Mhm.
yeah, a lot of stuff to think of, and a lot of stuff to consider. And we're working not just with the Ministry of Finance, but with all the different ministries. The Ministry of Health, they need help. They have a records modernization initiative going on right now. The records in Palau are still on paper. But a lot of the higher level care, you have to go to the Philippines or to Taiwan to get. And so this is something that'll allow doctors in those other countries to reach back and look at the medical file
Mhm.
online, introducing kind of the telemed
Yes.
uh, type stuff. But with that comes another cybersecurity concern with they don't have PII laws or what's the one for
PHI,
medical?
public health, private
Yeah,
health.
they don't
Yeah.
have that. There's no privacy laws in Palau, so a lot of the regulatory and legal framework stuff has to be developed as well. And so some of the work I do is with the National Congress to advise them on bills and things of that nature. Then education is another thing. They have probably around 3,000 endpoints that connect to services in the U.S. to get online education, online classes, and things for K through 12. So
Mhm.
that's a big one. And then there's a community college also that needs automation, and they need cybersecurity. So just all around, it's like you said, it's a lot of spinning plates, and every now and then I can walk up and give a little push
Yeah.
to them with the cybersecurity.
So, there's a lot of things I hear there of challenges, but, before people watching this goes, man, Palau must be stuck in the dark ages. Don't say that so quickly because a lot of times, as most of my people watching will be from the States, and most cyber professionals that are in, first what we call first world countries like the US and Europe, they might be like, oh, where's Palau been all these years? But you have to understand, even in different sectors in America, it was maybe 12 years ago where we had an incident in the Air Force. This is public information now, so it's not classified. But there was several audits done, and they found that there was a nuclear program that was being maintained and updated by 5.25 inch. Now, for people that are too young to remember, this is a 3.5 inch floppy. So I have one on my desk as a reminder of how far we've come. But a 5.25 is a big floppy disk, and they were maintaining the system with a 5.25 inch disk. And that was for our nuclear weapons platform systems, right? Like, launch the, press the red button, right? Turn the two keys. And that was just a, decade ago, a little over a decade ago. And we hear about these things all the time, like on like Navy warships and other ships where there's still issues. Like, I have to stop myself, Jason, because sometimes I got to quickly think, is that public information? But there's always these issues where even with as much modernization, with billions of defense funding dollars that we can build these great programs, it only takes a few people to just kind of cut the corners, and there's security issues in a lot of different things, whether it's not in modernizing these systems and software and keeping up with the times. This happens to every nation and country. In Palau's case, they didn't have really probably a lot of emphasis on technology yet because they were trying to maintain the stat quo. And when you're dealing with a population as a government, so what, having Jay on here, there's not a lot of CISOs in the world unless they're working for the White House, working for like the Prime Minister of France, and at these high level government levels that has this very unique experience that Jay is having, where they're having to stand up a program from ground zero. So if you just came in today was day one of being the CISO for France, for example, you already have a well-established program that's been running and being updated every 3, 4, 5 years for you, and you're just coming in to just fill a small amount of time. What Jay's having to do here is there's nothing built. He has to come in with his knowledge, his experience, and also at the same time, while trying to implement these things that he knows is the right way to build something, he's got to educate and train the people that are voting to continue funding and doing those things to bring themselves into current times and current technology. So I can only imagine the tightrope you have to walk with having to educate people that are also the ones approving the things that you're trying to do. So again, a huge handful in the life of a CISO, particularly one guiding a nation to build and develop their programs from the ground up. So my hat's off to you for the tremendous amount of work you have to do. With that being said, there was a couple other things I just kind of quickly wanted to go through. I did some reading and I read somewhere, and I could be wrong, it could be outdated information, but I read that Palau only has two traffic lights. Could you verify if that's still the
Oh,
case?
not the case. Oh, it has
Oh,
zero traffic lights now.
oh,
I think
there's
they
no
had,
traffic lights on the island.
yeah, it was just it was, I mean, it's a 2 lane road. People are very courteous, so we
Of course,
realize
it's a
that
small
the traffic
population.
light
So
was probably more disruptive than
yeah,
anything. So it's one of those situations, the opposite of Miami and South Florida traffic where everyone's cutting you off. It's
yeah,
more it's congested, but it's moving because everybody, hey, someone wants to come in, you just let
yeah.
them. Everyone takes turns. The Palamas know how to merge, so yeah, it's not a problem.
The next
In the
thing
mornings, there's traffic police, but that's more to keep like the students and stuff safe when they're crossing the road and whatnot. So it's no, it's actually. I
it
was
sounds like
concerned
a
too,
very
but
polite society.
yeah,
Um,
it is.
Something I want to share with the viewers because we mentioned, Palau is a small nation, but they're doing big things and they got a lot of attention because of some geopolitical stuff. But the one thing I did want to highlight, they're a member of an agreement, a partnership agreement, and if you could maybe talk a little bit about that agreement. But I believe it's Federated States of Micronesia, and I believe there's one more
Marshall Islands,
Marshall
Marshall
Islands.
Island,
Yes.
Marshalls.
Could you maybe talk a little bit about that and why strategically that's important in this region?
Yeah, definitely. So if you know the World War II history, your World War II history with the island hopping campaign that was critical to securing the Pacific and winning the war. Uh, Palau is on the westernmost island chain, and on the western edge of that island chain. So it's the last island before you get to Japan and the Philippines, uh, mainland China, India, and so it is uh, in terms of logistics for Navy vessels and things of that nature. Uh, if you can refuel at your farthest point forward, you have a benefit. So there's a strategic advantage there, especially in an area of operation as large as the Pacific, right? Big ocean, tiny ship. If it can stop and get gas, that there and a friendly port that is with the same standards and equipment and stuff that you would find in the U.S. Right? So the compatibility and integration that's important strategically. It's also in terms of intelligence gathering. They're very close to North Korea and the PRC again, so you can observe what's going on. So there's a multi-million-dollar project now to put an over-the-horizon radar site in Palau. There's projects to improve the harbor, so possibly put an aircraft carrier in Palau. There's only one harbor though, so it's got to be managed between the import-export business, mostly import. Palau imports 80% of its food.
Yeah.
And it's goods. So we don't really export anything except maybe tourism and now some of the fintech programs that we're working on. So it's in that aspect, it's really important. It's very important strategically. And there's not to get into too much of the geopolitics, but there's stuff going on between the U.S. and PRC for control and influence within the Pacific.
Yeah.
That's just constantly going on.
So not to deep dive into any of the geopolitical stuff, because that could be several hours by itself. But what I would kind of want to let the viewers know, again, why Palau is kind of thrust into the spotlight, in the world spotlight, is because there's a lot of things going on in the Indo-PACOM region, that's what we'll call it from a military term perspective. But Taiwan is kind of at the center of this in a way. And so Taiwan, if anyone does any Googling, back during COVID when we had supply chain issues popping up and whether we couldn't get cars, prices of cars went up because of microprocessors, and these microprocessors go in everything. When you talk about Internet of Things, you talk about our routers, our mobile devices, our cars, our vehicles, everything's interconnected somehow to Wi-Fi enabled or have you. So we had a lot of these microprocessor issues because of the global shutdown. And so the issue is, if you look it up, Taiwan produces about 90% of general purpose microprocessors, 90% of the world's supply. And then when you start getting into the more of the next generation, the AI-enabled chipsets by NVIDIA, which they announced a few months ago, these things are very, very valuable type of technology. And I believe there's about 16 or 17 US patents that are involved in the manufacture of those AI-enabled chips in Taiwan. Coincidentally, within 24 hours after the CEO, Jensen of NVIDIA, announced that new AI-enabled chipset, somehow China leaked that they had a plan to take over Taiwan in less than 6 hours. That was by no mistake. Whether or not that's true or not, who knows? Just like the recent news story that they broke AES-256 encryption, which is determined to be just misinformation. But this kind of strategy is what's been feeding this battle behind the scenes that most people, Americans, aren't familiar with. But what Americans need to
Yeah.
understand, that if there is to be a takeover of Taiwan, this will impact not just the United States, but all markets, all countries, because of an immediate microprocessor shortage overnight. So that is right there, not just for the US interest, but for the global interests at large. That is a very important nation right there. And having the support of the Palau government, as well as the Marshall Islands and the Federated States of Micronesia, these islands are part of an agreement that is siding with supporting the government of Taiwan. And this is a very, very important agreement. So for anyone watching, do your Googling, do your own research, but this is very important. And these things, it's a shame that our politics, it's an election year. And of course, by the time this airs, it's probably going to be around Christmas time. But if you're watching this, and no matter who wins the U.S. presidential election here in 2024, no presidential candidate has been even talking about the situation in the Asia Pacific region. Nowhere near enough. And the problem is by the time it becomes mainstream media, we're spectating, we're not participating into the courses of action that's occurring. So I urge if there's anybody of influence in government in DC, Capitol Hill, or if you work in the office of a senator representative, put a bug in their ear that, hey, they might need to keep a better eye on what's going on in the Pacific region because these things over time will become huge issues. But I will say having Palau as an ally partner to our initiatives is better than them not being a partner to us. So definitely me as my own self with the amount of research I've done here this year in Palau, again, tremendous amount of respect for what you are doing, Jay. And I want to kind of talk about another thing that happened. We kind of mentioned it earlier. You did have to navigate your country through a couple ransomware attacks. And really, quite frankly, I can only imagine the advanced persistent threats that you're dealing with on a regular basis. So without having you breach any kind of confidentiality or give any specific details, because I want to respect your job, but what are some things you could say are some challenges with trying to keep on top of these, ever evolving threats now that we have AI writing malicious code, we have, polymorphic type of attacks that are happening at an increased scale than we've seen in the
Mhm.
past.
No, so yeah, really the big challenge when I first took the role was the culture, right? So
Yeah, changing
it's
the
a free
mindset.
and open networks, right? There's because there was really no cyber. It was the first organization that I had encountered in a long time that didn't even do annual security awareness training,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So no, not even the basic stuff for just users. The and then so just being so that and then you're resource constrained. Going back to your comments about where's Palau been? Why aren't they doing this? You'll find a lot of that is tied to resources. I find a lot of that here in Florida, working with local and county governments. They have to make a decision where they're going to spend their money, and then you'll find a lot of people who are dual hatted as the CISO, the CIO. You really can't be both. That person doesn't have time to. And when budget it comes up, like, do I buy
This or
a
that.
sim or do
Yeah.
I buy new laptops for everybody so that they can do their job? So it's really resource allocation and resource management. And then I also like knowing that culture. I couldn't just go in. It's not the DoD. I didn't have like mature processes and regulations and stuff that I could back me up. Like, we have to have this in place. We need to spend money here. I needed to be as frictionless as possible, and that's something that hardcore information system security managers in the DoD
Yeah.
do not do well, right? But you just have to be in tune with the culture and with your environment. And it's been at this point it's been about a 2.5 year process, right? You just got to uh, get find out like what the requirements are, where the gaps are. There were many, and then just set your priorities. And the way I did that was I we started with ISO 27001.
Nice.
Pick a framework. We started with ISO 27001. We looked at NIST CSF. I think it was 1.1 at the time, but there was no governance function yet. Uh, Once NIST 2.0 came out, we shifted to 2.0 because now they added the govern function, and that's the key. Like you have to set your regulations and policies of what we're supposed to comply with, and then everything else follows.
Mhm.
Because once policy means no, I'm going to put resources to it. Policy means these are the controls that apply to my network, and these are the controls that we're going to implement and put resources against. So once we define that, now everything is flowing,
Mhm.
right? We got policy signed. We're starting with the low hanging fruit, which is user awareness training. So in fiscal year 2025, we're we're going to start doing like regular semi-annual because we need to get a little bit more frequency than just annual. No one's going to remember 8 months from now
Yeah.
what was in that class. Is this plus the threat landscape keeps changing, so you want
Mhm.
to bring fresh perspectives to your training programs. And then everyone signing acceptable use policy. That's another thing that wasn't being done. What that does is when they acknowledge the acceptable use policy, it changes their mindset of, oh,
Being responsible.
this is now a government. I'm responsible, and my job can be on the line if I click on phishing emails and compromise our network. And then we started doing weekly tips, just sending out little reminders of what to look for, so that we have a little bit more frequency. Probably change it to monthly, weeklies. Right. The great thing about the network though is it's small enough that it's manageable right
Yeah.
now. And so the sense of urgency on my part is to get these things in place
Before you start
before the
expanding.
next
Yeah.
modernization leap happens, and then we're like dealing with even more threats on an exponential level.
One of the
And
things,
so,
go ahead, Jay.
yep. No, so that that's such it. The key really was that framework and the GRC, getting the GRC piece in place, and then letting everything else follow from there. We can build business cases
Hmm.
and tell the Congress with a degree of certainty, like we need to spend money here because this control is critical. If we don't, this is what could happen.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to boil the ocean and ask
Of
for just
course.
an arbitrary
Well,
amount of money.
a lot of things Jay said there that just was humorous to me earlier. He was talking about, when you sometimes have a level 99 professional, senior person come in, auditor, systems analyst, or just what's the word, a consultant come in sometimes, and they'll come in and say, that's broken, that's broken. Why are you doing it this way? They come in with the finger pointing. And the thing is human nature and human psychology is no one likes to have the finger pointed at them. No one wants to feel like they're dumb, that they messed up, that they're ignorant. No one wants to feel this. So, for anyone out there that is in a position where you do audits and checklists and you're checking on people's programs, always go in with, a little bit of humility, knowing that you was there at one time. You worked for a company that didn't have it all together. I know I've got 1,001 stories about different organizations, military and commercial I worked for that was ate up, as we would say, but we did the best we could. And so, when Jay talks about, hey, he had to go and look and see what's the thing he could work on right now and move some things in the right direction. That's the kind of approach a lot of people should have. Pick up a broom. Instead of pointing at people while you're not doing your job, pick up the broom and people will sometimes follow you and you'll earn their respect. When you pick up the broom and start cleaning up the messes instead of pointing at the mess, going, why is this like this? Why is this like this? That's not the right approach. So, like I said, it takes a lot to be the level of person where you can have empathy, to have the context of the history of what's been going on. And instead of saying, okay, why, this, instead of say, okay, this is what we can start with. Start here and just baby steps. And, doing the training and education is the right move because once you get 100% of your people at least trained to know what the right looks like, now you can start because, it's one person can't move a couch, but two people can move it real easy. So that's a
Yeah.
good thing with the education. Also, Jay, with the ransomware and stuff, and again, I applaud you for the training. The education is tremendously the right step. And he mentioned the ISO 27001. Folks, there's a dozen plus frameworks out there. And what a framework does at the end of the day, it provides you that strategy of how to build a house. So think of a house with all of the support beams and structures in the roof and so forth. Ultimately, the policies that Jay is advising the government to approve and to kind of build the walls of the house and to build the floors, that's what fills out the framework. The framework will only get you so far. The policies are what takes you the rest of the way. It's the rest of the house. And again, there's so many out there. You got we talked about RMF, NIST RMF. That's a risk management framework. We have the ISO policies. We have there's SOC 2. There's PCI DSS. There's a great one out of Australia. I'm a huge fan of this one this year. It's called Essential 8. And particularly for
Mm.
small to medium businesses, if you are a small to medium business owner right now, You're looking at RMF going, I was told this is free, but there's so many publications, I'm lost. Hey, let me save you a lot of reading. Start with Essential 8. If you can start with those 8 and get those 8, you're about 70% ahead of most businesses in your category into doing securing your business. So Essential 8, if you take anything from those frameworks, Essential 8, start there. If you master that and you're ready for what's next, then you can take it up from there depending on your industry. You can always message me and I'll give you some guidance on that. Jay, I know you spent. Thank you for sharing so much about your job and the many hats you wear. I know we don't have enough time to go deep dive and everything, but one more thing I wanted to talk about in relation to Palau was recently they put out a blockchain initiative, which is more of an investment for the people. I believe it's more like a bond, a prototype blockchain bond. Could you give us a little bit of insight into this program? Because I think this is fascinating that they're already embracing
Yeah,
cryptocurrency.
no, of course. Yeah, no. So it's gone through beta testing, and then we had a live demo last month, and it works, right? And the idea is there's around $300 million of revenue generated every year in Palau, and most Palauans have there's two primary commercial banks. No, there's three. Uh, the two I deal with mostly are Bank of Hawaii and Bank of Guam. They have branches there. Then the other one I think is Bank Pacific. They're also like based out of Guam. So those three banks provide deposit services like regular banking, traditional banking services. But there's no investment of the revenue that they collect into Palau. There's no like mortgage. There's no mortgages in Palau. There are no like car loans. They don't. So none of that money is reinvested in Palau. Is reinvested abroad. So like banks hold deposits and then they make money off of that money, right? So your money's not the money's not never sleeping. It's always working, but it's working for the bank and it's working for other outside non-Palauan entities. So the idea is to create this bond with the National Development Bank of Palau, which is a Palauan-owned bank. It's a semi-private, semi-public bank, and then that money and all the interest and everything that's earned from it will go to critical infrastructure in Palau, uh,
Right.
different programs in Palau, and be reinvested into Palau. So I mean, $300 million is a lot of money. Right now, Palau gets zero from it, and So the idea is, hey, instead of going to these other banks and putting all your money there, you have in
Reinvest in
savings
the country.
accounts. Yeah, you reinvest in the country at probably a much a better rate than you would get. And then we used blockchain security and technology is just so much better in terms of the anti-money laundering, counter financing of terrorism, and know your customer aspects of it. So it's something that we've been looking at for a few years now. It started with the digital residency program, which I'm the director for as well, where it's a digital ID on chain. So again, know your customer, anti-money laundering regulations internationally are followed. There's a very rigorous onboarding process that's transparent to the applicant, but we use different technologies and different third-party vendors that do a very deep dive into your background in hundreds of different databases to verify that you are who you say you are, but also to check, have you been involved with financing terrorism or laundering money, or even have you like worked at a bank that went under because you mismanaged
Yeah.
funds. That happens all more often than people think. And then it's all on chain. It's all verified there. The other project we worked on, it was a pilot project with Ripple using the XRP ledger. We tested a national payment system in the form of a stable coin, which tokenize the dollar. We set up 168 different users with wallets, and then through a grant, also from Ripple's research and development grant, we were able to give everyone $100 and say, go to these different participating retailers and spend it so we can test the system. And then we got feedback. Technologically, absolutely no problem, right? The system itself worked. The only hangup was the network, right? The Wi-Fi. In some areas it would time out just because we have a fiber optic cable that goes to Palau, but that fiber hasn't extended everywhere yet. So a lot of stuff is still point to point, line of sight. So you get 3G, 4G at best in a
Yeah.
lot of places. But over the next 6 months, that's going to slowly improve as the mobile core network gets swapped out. We get 5G in place, and they extend fiber to all the homes and businesses.
Well,
So
Jay,
it's exciting. It's Palau's gonna have, at the end of the day, Palau's gonna have probably the most advanced mobile core network and fiber optic infrastructure in the Pacific.
and that's going to be exciting. And the fact that you was there at ground level to help steer these initiatives, great work that you're doing for the nation of Palau, Jay. Again, kudos, a tremendous, reflects upon you so favorably, your reputation to build this. Some things just I wanted to share because I mean, a lot of folks watching this, he mentioned like, when they increase their fiber, there's going to be more attacks and so forth. In Kuwait is one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. Their dinar, the Kuwaiti dinar, I think is number two or number one as the most valuable currency. And they've had widespread phishing campaigns against people getting text messages appearing to be from the Ministry of Interior and for people to go to a website. So they've had this already happen this year. They've had a significant increase in advanced persistence threats and attacks against their people in society. And they are trying their best to launch information campaigns for their people. The banks are trying to put out information and flyers, posters, and so forth. So they're taking a lot of initiative. They've even has, I think it's the 2020 or the 2030 vision for Kuwait, where cyber is one of the main pillars of what they're trying to improve in the infrastructure. So even a wealthy country that's all rich like Kuwait is still struggling with cybersecurity education training and with these attacks because they do have a viable currency. They do have the oil and gas here. So again, it's not just Palau's in this fight. Every nation is in this fight. So if I could just happy to share that with you, Jay. Palau is not alone in these struggles and doing things like the digital ID program. Kuwait is trying to modernize just as well. So it's interesting to see where we have a small nation of Palau, but we have an oil rich country like Kuwait, and they're both dealing with very similar challenges. Jay, I really appreciate all the time that you've gotten to share with the cybersecurity stuff. But if you have just a few more minutes, I'd like to do like a speed round of questions with all my guests
Sure.
where there's no right or wrong answer. It's meant to be a little fun because we've been talking tech, 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 tech. Now it's like, let's have a few moments of fun. You game for this?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, no right or wrong answer. Just first answer pops in your head. Cake or pie?
Cake.
Cake. All right. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Star
Come
Wars, my
on.
man. Okay. What has been your most favorite book that you read of all time? And then what's the last book you've read?
Oh, definitely Don Quixote by Miguel
Classic.
Cervantes. Yeah, I love that book. More the first part than the second
Yeah.
part, but the first part's a lot funnier, a lot more humor. But yeah. Oh, the last book I read. Oh man, I have not read a normal book in a while. Uh, I can't remember the title of it. It's called the Ransomware. Oh gosh, I have it here somewhere. But it's basically a book about the history of ransomware and what started as a small uh, operation. I want to say in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, where this guy helps people with ransomware attacks and helps crack the cryptography and stuff. Ransomware hunters
Ah,
or what? Ransomware hunting gang or something like that.
uh,
It's a really good book.
awesome. Um, I want to talk about some nonprofit initiatives and some things. And I've seen on your socials recently where you do a lot of time and energy and effort into support in STEM, especially for our youth. And before I get to the real question here, I'm a father of a single father, 17 years. I raised two daughters. And STEM, especially for girls in school, because we don't have enough women in the science and technology, engineering, mathematics fields. But I've been a long proponent of STEM. I have a book series that's focused on STEM, fantasy
Mhm.
series. And then when I see that you're doing a lot of work in the community to promote STEM in schools, this is something that's near and dear to me as well. So could you maybe share a little bit about these initiatives and things that you do and why it's important to you?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So the first uh, organization is AFCEA, Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association.
I
They
believe
just
that's
shortened it
close.
AFCEA. It's a lot easier, right? So, and really, what AFCEA does is they kind of create that bridge between industry, academia, and the military. So, of course, those of us who have worked both sides, we know like a lot of times industry and the emerging technology and just the culture is a lot different than the rigor and strict and your stuff of the DoD. So you want to have an organization that can bridge the two, and so that the Department of Defense really can tap into that emerging technology to improve communications and cybersecurity overall. But what AFCEA also does, they're big on STEM scholarships, and that's something that I was the president and I'm the treasurer of FCS South Florida. So we do fundraising. We do an annual Top Golf tournament, bring vendors and military organizations together, and raise money. We get sponsors, and after we pay for Top Golf, all of the money goes to scholarships. So over the last 4 years since I've been involved with the program, I believe we've given away around $10,000 in scholarships.
Nice.
So anywhere, depending on how much we were able to raise, $500 to $1,000 scholarships. The next organization, I'm on the ISACA South Florida board of directors. I'm the marketing director right now, but we do a lot of outreach with local universities and mostly the public schools like Miami-Dade College, Broward College, but also with Florida International University, and like bolstering their cyber programs and helping them with different credentialing opportunities and continuing education through different monthly conferences. In February, we have the WOW event. It's our like key annual event where we bring in speakers from all over the world to present on different initiatives and emerging technology in cybersecurity, but leaning more, of course, towards AI. AI is the big buzzword now. If you put AI in front of something, you're going to get funding, just
Yeah.
like cyber
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago. But and ISACA does the CISM, CISA, and a couple of other certifications for DoD folks. That gets you your level 3 for IAM and IAT
Mhm.
level certifications when you're looking for jobs or promotions and stuff within not just the government world, but the government contracting world. A lot of times you can't even get the job if you don't have
You
Security
don't meet the
Plus,
cert. Yeah.
and you're not gonna. Yeah, so we help organizations meet their certification requirements. Then the last one, and the one that I really love, is the Miami-Dade County Public School Systems STEM Advisory Board. They put together a lot of programs for K through 12, where they partner with different organizations throughout Miami-Dade County, including Lennar, including my small business, not just to find funding, but also internship opportunities and professional development opportunities. Like Lennar recently sponsored 15 high school students from one of the Miami-Dade County schools to come in, and they did a tour of the Security Operations Center and talked to the
Nice.
Security Operations Center analysts. And what do you do every day? How do you what does a SOC even look like? Things of that nature. So we try to do and coordinate a lot more of those types of things. We also do county and then regional hackathons every year. So we'll have one coming up. Matter of fact, tomorrow morning. So I coordinate with EC Council and an organization called Cyber Florida, so that we get the funding and the expertise to run those hackathons, and it's really great for the kids. Whether they've done hacking before, participated
Brand
in
new.
capture the flag events, to this is my first time. What do I do? So we get volunteer coaches to kind of help get them going and expose them to that kind of stuff, because it sounds like really cool. Everyone sees the movies where the hacker gets in front of a computer, starts pecking away, and the FBI database is open. No, it's not quite that easy.
Right there, right there.
Everybody has firewalls and intrusion detection systems and protection now. So what does it look like, and what is rule? What do you really do when the capture the flag event? So and they're exciting. We do two of those locally, and then a regional one, and then it feeds to the statewide hackathon in March. That's also put on by Cyber Florida. And last year was the first one. There were over 2,000 students, fully
Nice.
funded by the state of Florida, to go and participate, including their transportation and hotels for
Wow.
the students and their chaperones.
Well, Jay, color me impressed, man, because with all the demands you have with your day job, running other businesses and consulting and being an advisory board member, and of course, you've just named 4 or 5 nonprofit organizations and initiatives and programs and projects that you are participating and helping plan and run. That's a testament to the character of this gentleman right here, because not only has he got a demanding job, when he's done with that, most people would shut off for the day, turn their phone off, and just try to reset their brains for another day of it. But no, when you give your time and energy to things that it's not putting money in your pocket, you're helping others, helping your communities, helping your county and your state. That's a testament to the caliber of this cyber professional that we've had a fortunate time talking to today. Jay, I want to thank you so much for giving me this time, because I know your time is valuable. Before we close off, there's one thing I forgot to ask you, and I'm asking at the end, and this is every guest. And I'm sorry it's at the end, but it's just as important. For anyone watching, I always like to ask someone their day one story. And the reason why I do this is that somewhere in your story, someone may identify part of them in that story and then get that feeling that they can too. And I want people that are considering coming to IT cyber is, hey, jump in the pool. The water's warm. We need you. We need more people in cyber and securing organizations and companies. But if we could go in a time machine and go back in time to a younger Jay that said, I want to make IT cyber my career. What is that story, if you don't mind sharing that? And then I know you got to go, but I'd love to share that
Sure,
story.
no, not at all, not at all. Like I mentioned, I was a signal officer, a U.S. Army signal officer. So most of my experience had been in setting up tactical telecommunications networks. Right, there was some, we didn't call it cybersecurity. Cyber didn't exist until 2009, so thereabouts, with after Stuxnet. So there was we called it information
Mission
assurance,
assurance.
and it was mostly, patching. I remember in Afghanistan, in our daily stand-ups, I would brief. I was a battle captain, so I'd brief the network status. This is how many outages we had. We restored it, lessons learned, et cetera, et cetera. And then we go around the room. You get the weather, the engineers, and then there was a warrant officer, and uh, she had one specialist, one soldier with her, and then they would say something. I had no idea what they were talking about, right? Like the WSUS pushed patches XYZ 123, da 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 da, and we're at 80% complete, and everyone's like, all right, who cares? Go away, right? And then fast forward, and now it's like this big thing. And so fast forward a little bit more, when I arrived at U.S. Southern Command in Miami, I didn't know what I was getting into. They told me I was going to be the deputy cyber security division chief. I was
Hmm.
like, oh, okay.
Well, Jay,
Yeah,
you
I
know
guess.
that the deputy part means you do all the work, just so you know.
Yes, exactly. So peel back a little bit further. This is 2015. In 2015, the DoD was rolling out RMF. They had adopted NIST RMF as their framework. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to deal with it, and so they gave it to the new guy.
Yeah. But
Uh,
then,
and you know, again, it goes back to what you said, like going in and approaching things with humility and an open mind and a willingness to learn. I paid attention to. I had excellent uh, GS civilians as the branch chiefs and the governance branch chief. She brought me in, like she had written a white paper that no one else read, but was very informative of what you needed to do. She told me the regulations I needed to read and the research I needed to do, and I did it. And she told me, if you want to be accepted into our community, you need to do the CISM. And so I studied for it, and I passed the CISM. And true enough, I mean, like people were like, "Oh, you're one of us now. You know what you're talking about." Right? But from that, I was able to build business cases, and that's where I really my introduction to cybersecurity was with GRC, and from that I understand what engineers do. I understand the engineering piece. I understand the technology. I understand what analysts look for. I understand the forensics piece. But then I have the overarching picture of what you're trying to do with all these controls and the framework and being compliant,
and the why it
which
matters.
and why it matters. Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
Well,
So
thank
yeah,
you so
that's
much.
my origin story, if you will, and
So there's
I
his
stuck with.
hero story, y'all. And I'm sorry I didn't ask that earlier. I usually do that in the first one third of the podcast. Jay, are you, anything that we talked about? You mentioned AFCEA. You mentioned a lot of nonprofit organizations. You mentioned one of your businesses or two of your businesses. If you would send me all the links to anything you want me to share in the description below, you send it to me. I'm going to copy paste it. So anyone watching that wanted to kind of go down the rabbit hole and check these other sites and resources. And Jay's going to send me some links. They'll be right down here below. You don't have to go Googling. You can just click and go right to the resource. Jay, if
I
you don't mind,
appreciate it.
I'll put your LinkedIn profile there so people can follow you and the great things you're doing for the nation of Palau. And again,
Yeah, of
keep
course.
doing the great work you're doing. Color me impressed. I've seen some of your social media recently. I've seen some of the struggles and challenges you've had to do. It is not an easy thing, and you have kind of went through it as if it was nothing. So I know the challenges are only going to grow, but you're the right man, I think, to tackle them all. So thank you so much for being part of the Top Cyber Pro podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right.